Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course, that makes this episode 24 of Circles and Squares a lovely day for podcasting. Kate, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
You know what? I'm still recovering from this whole BlizzCon Metallica debacle from yesterday. We'll talk about it more in the news section later, but for those that don't know, just Metallica getting their concert covered up by random
I
lo-fi music, man, that just killed me yesterday.
I don't know how do we know that isn't what they were just actually playing?
You know what? I guess we can't prove it. Although you said you were watching the stream, like, not on
Yeah,
Twitch, so you actually
that's
got to
true. I
see it.
watched it not on Twitch and it was fine. So this was a surprise for me. Um,
Wow,
um
what a way to start. You know, I wasn't expecting any Metallica news to come out of BlizzCon. I wasn't even paying attention to BlizzCon when it happened yesterday. So, I mean, yeah, just I wasn't expecting that. But this has been great. I guess we're kind of ruining the news section for later, though, Kate. We got a pretty busy show. Maybe we should just get into it. So before we do, though, we have a quick shout out just coming up for the next episode, number 25. Kate, you want to tell people about what we're planning?
yeah, exactly. So it's our quarter century mark, which is like holy crap, I can't believe how fast that came up.
Yeah, no
But
kidding.
we're doing something and I think it's going to be really exciting. I think we're making a top 25 games of all time list, but the twist on it is it's going to be a combined list. So we're both going to kind of pre-prepare our top 25, which is already hard enough because like how the hell do you
How do you
narrow.
quantify? Yeah, top 25.
Yeah, exactly. How do you quantify? How do you narrow down exactly like your top 25 and like, is it like best games that you think right now or like what about games that were really important to you in your childhood but like you wouldn't go back and play like it anyway. We're stressed out about it but we're also excited. And then we're going to bring our 25 each and then we're going to make a combined list of those games and try to like there might be some overlap which will help but otherwise we're going to be fighting for games and arguing and pitching things and then we're going to end up with some kind of monstrosity of circles and squares 25 best games of all time.
And it's going to be the definitive list too. Like this is the official list of the best games of all time. You don't have to look at anywhere else. There's no other websites. It's just our podcast. So we will be the definitive authority on best 25 games of all time next episode. But this episode, we still have a lot to talk about. Like I said, we're going to start off by talking about the games we've been playing, which includes a gigantic PS Plus blowout, like we mentioned last time. We've got Concrete Genie, Destruction AllStars, and Control all coming up. So then we'll take a quick break. We'll talk about the news, getting more into that Metallica BlizzCon debacle, and talk about the Nintendo Direct that happened yesterday. Because damn, it's been like 530 days, I think, since we had an official Nintendo Direct. So even though we're a PlayStation show, I think it's worth talking about,
That
especially
sounds like
since. Go ahead.
530 sounds like some like ridiculous exaggeration you'd pick up but like has it actually been that
Yeah, no,
long?
seriously, I think it's been like 500 and something days. I think I saw that online. Maybe we'll double check, but
Right.
it's been like
From
a
a proper
long
direct,
time.
like, they've done little like, they did, like, that Mario anniversary thing, they've done smaller things, but yeah, I guess a proper direct.
Yeah, no, seriously,
That's
because they've had like the mini
insane.
directs and the partner directs and the indie
Right,
showcases and all that, but they haven't had like a Nintendo Direct, like a straight up regular direct for
right.
I think it was 530 days.
Wow.
Um, Crazy, right? Yeah. So we'll talk about that, and then to close out the show with the third segment, there was actually a game called Triangle Strategy that was announced during the direct, which we are both really interested in. So we played the demo that came out for that, and we're going to chat about that at the end. But like I said before, let's talk about the games we've been playing, Kate, and let's start off with the first of the 3 PS Plus games, Concrete Genie. Which is damn, this game has a very impressive art style. I just want to shout out right off the top. That's kind of what it's known for, I guess, right? Is just this interesting art design where you can you have a lot of different options of how you can paint these different pictures, and it's almost like the city kind of lights up in these neon colors as you go through, and I really enjoyed the look of it.
Yeah, and it's funny, it tells you at the start of the game because that's the whole, like I mean, that's the whole premise of the game, right? Is that you're painting the darkness out of the city and sort of recreating it with your art. And the start of the game, it tells you, like or I don't know if it was the start or if it was just, like, the synopsis of the game, but it's like, "Don't worry, like, you don't have to be an artist, like, your painting is gonna make you an artist, you're gonna feel like one." And so when I sat down to play it, like, with a couple people, we sort of joked about we kinda made fun of that line a little bit, and
Mm.
then I did my first painting, I was like, "Oh my god, I really do feel like an artist."
The game does a good job of making you feel like you can create some beautiful images, I think, because it's not like overly complex. You don't have like individual brush strokes or anything. They're like stickers you're placing on the walls basically, so you can create kind of
Yeah, and
not
yes, and
pre-made scenes, but you know.
Yeah, it does a very good job of, like, course correcting you, and if you there's not really any way to mess up and make it look bad, which is really good because you just make these, like, wholesome, nice artworks, and especially at the end of the game where it kind of, like, zooms you past a lot of your work, and you get to see, like, what you've done. It would be really shitty if it's like, "Oh god, like, don't look at that section, it's terrible." But it is, like I'm really impressed with how, like, well everything, like, blends together as well, like, you can kinda switch, like, now you're doing grass, then now you're painting a tree, then you're making the sun, and it all just kind of, like, seamlessly fits into itself. They actually came up with what it seems simple, but I bet is a really, like, complicated system under the hood.
I think so, yeah. So the game itself is kind of told through the perspective of your character. I forget his name. I think it's Ash, right? And
Ash,
he's
yeah.
he's kind of this guy, and he's a bit of an outcast, getting bullied by these other kids in town. And there's this whole kind of storyline about him having to kind of go through this worn down town and paint over it and revitalize it, basically. And there's some kind of weird spirit creatures that are taking over, all that kind of thing. And you're going through, and it's kind of like a puzzle platformer. I personally didn't find the platforming super great. Like it wasn't bad. It was just kind of there to get you through the game.
Mhm.
It's really based around the art and the design, and you create these genies, which is what is called Concrete Genie. They're like beings that you create through your art, and then help you with the puzzles. So they walk along the walls kind of through the town and follow you around, and then you'll get to different sections where there'll be you know, electrical box that needs to be powered. So you have to bring a certain type of genie over to the electrical box and then draw kind of whatever art he's looking for, and then he'll power up the box and open this gate so you can get through to the next area. So it's just very light kind of puzzle solving in its mechanics. I don't know if you found it overly challenging. Like for me, it seemed like the puzzles weren't really very complicated, other than just making sure you had the art that each genie needed to kind of complete its action.
Yeah, I don't think it was overly challenging. What's funny is the one place that we kinda got stuck for a couple seconds was, you have to light up and when you light on a when you paint on a building, it, like, lights up these little lights on it, and you have to kind of, like, complete the whole area having, like, it be fully painted, and so there was, like, a section that we had clearly missed, but we couldn't figure out where it was, and eventually we found out it does show you on the map the section you've missed, but it's, like, kind
It's
of
hard to find.
yeah, like, the map is sort of it's very busy and hard to read, and so we didn't realize that there was, like, one tiny little section that wasn't lit up. So, like, that's where we got stuck, but it wasn't, like, in terms of the gameplay being difficult or not being able to figure out a puzzle, it's just, like, we didn't know that one little place that we hadn't gone to. So,
Mhm.
that was sort of unfortunate, but everything else, like, yeah, it was pretty good difficulty-wise, I'd say. Like, I don't think it's the kinda game that you want to be challenging because, like, it's more of just a nice wholesome experience versus like, feeling like you're playing too much of a game?
Yeah, I don't think it's really possible to get stuck in that way either. I mean, there is a few places I guess you could get stuck there where you're there's a bit of a stealth element to part of it where you're trying to sneak around those other kids that are bullying you, and kind of painting on the walls and dragging them over to a different part of the city. So I guess you could kind of get stuck there if you weren't so adept at the stealth, but it's pretty straightforward. It's more just about the experience, I would say. But towards the end of the game, and we are going to spoil it here, the game really introduces a few mechanics, like, and really changes itself. It's one of these games that seems to have like the final act is way different than the rest of the game, because it doesn't this game does not have any combat in it, or like a lot of mobility options throughout most of the game. And then when you get to the end, you all of a sudden get this new movement option where you can skate around like on your paint, kind of like a Splatoon-esque type of movement option where it speeds you up so much. And I wish I had that throughout more of the game, because it was actually like way easier to get around. And then there's also like combat that gets introduced. And I don't know, I feel like it was a really weird introduction right at the end, and it wasn't overly in depth. It wasn't overly fun. I almost wish that they maybe escalated some of the puzzles at the end instead of adding more like action elements.
Yeah, it was a weird left turn that, like, I really didn't see coming, and I don't know, like, those kind of twists I think sometimes can work, and it is also I think my problem with Concrete Genie and overall I'm very positive about it, but I feel like the game was, like, a little bit too long, and I feel like they had to introduce that, combat or just something just to keep you from getting sort of, like, tired of just the painting, and to kind of, like, keep you going in terms of, like, mechanic and, like, like, desire to keep playing the
Hmm.
game. So, like, when I first started playing it, I assumed it was gonna be kind of like a journey sort of experience where it was, like, bite size, you could beat it in maybe, like, 2 hours, like, you kinda just sit down and it's more of, like, an experience than a game. And it kind of felt like that with the painting, but then the game is actually, like, a little bit longer than that, and so that's where, like, more of the puzzles and then
Like the
the
action
combat
sequence.
comes into it, and, like, I don't think they were necessarily bad. I just think that, like, I would've maybe enjoyed it more as a package if it was that condensed experience that just sort of, like, had you do that wholesome, like, feel like you're watching a Pixar movie for an evening instead of it being, like, a drawn out game.
Hmm.
But that being said, I think, like, as a kid, I would've liked it how it is currently because there's just a little bit more to do, and I think, like, the combat would have been a little bit more exciting for a kid than
Yeah,
for
yeah.
us to play, so I think it's good as it exists right now, but I think, like, just selfishly and personally, it wasn't quite what I expected out of the experience.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm really positive on it too. And I mean, like we're just talking about the game and criticisms and good things all lumped in together, right? And I'm positive on this game as well. My only thing with it is I just felt that the ending sequence was just a bit out of place. And I don't know if they maybe had more ambition when they were first designing the game and wanted these elements like the action type stuff to be more included throughout the game, and then they scaled it back as they were releasing, or their vision kind of changed or something. But I would have liked to have seen either give me more movement options right off the start, or just
Mhm.
maybe don't try and put them in right at the end. Like it was just a bit weird. Like it was some nice variation, but I don't know. It just kind of was like, here's these mechanics, play with them for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then you're just done. Like it was just kind of weird pacing at the end to me. But
Mhm.
overall, like I really enjoyed it. The story was really cool. It was pretty heartwarming, like in a way that I wasn't really expecting. Um,
Yeah,
with like
it
the
was
way you kind of have a resolution with the characters that you meet at the front of the game, and I
yeah,
really enjoyed that portion.
it's very much got that, like, oh, like, the kid's bullying you, but he's got stuff going on at home, and, like, it's kind of like a very, like, acceptance and, like, being kind to each other, like, again, like, a really good story for, like, a kid to kinda go through. But what did crack me up is, like, at the very beginning, the story is good, but it just cracked me up at the beginning, like, you can find some, like, newspapers, and they give you, like, a little bit of, like, context about what's going on with the town, and, like, like we mentioned before, the town's getting, like, covered in darkness, and so the first newspaper you find is like, "Oh, no, this darkness is seeping into the town," like, and their problem-solving solution is basically like, "Well, I hope it leaves." Like, there's no, like, these are, like, the fucking newspaper people, right? Like, obviously, you as this one kid solve the problem, but, like, the actual, like, press and, like, government, they're like, "Well, we really hope it leaves," and then a few minutes later, you find a second newspaper, and it's like, "Oh, no, it didn't leave. Guess we'll leave." Like, that's the problem, so I was like, "Shit, plan A didn't work. I guess we have to leave then." And it cracked me
Damn.
up as in, like, it was a very, like, watered down, like, black and white, like, like a little kid's story, but it was genuinely quite cute. Just those newspapers cracked me up as in like, "Ah, shit, our plan didn't work. Didn't just leave."
I definitely did not catch those newspapers. That's funny. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Concrete Genie though, all in all, recommended for sure, especially on PS Plus. Like, check it out if you got a
Mhm.
free afternoon, free weekend, probably maybe one or two sittings, depending. But yeah, it's cool. Kate, how about we talk about Destruction AllStars, another game that was free on PS Plus this month, specifically for PS5 users. And this game it exists.
Yep. That
uh,
that that sums it up pretty nicely.
so we sat down, and I've played a couple sessions. I played with a friend of mine, and then you and I sat down the other night and played some matches. And the more I played this game, the more my opinion has solidified that it's not a bad game. It is a game, and it exists. And like there's not. It's just it's a generic kind of party game. Doesn't stick out in a lot of ways. It doesn't have a lot of substance. I'm gonna just say it. Very little, like, besides just picking your mode, driving your car around. Like there's just not a lot to draw you in. Like the first thing that I've noticed about the game is that it wants to have this personality similar to like an Overwatch or like one of these hero shooters, with these characters that are very recognizable and have personalities and silly dances and costumes. And despite how badly the game seems to want to have these things, it doesn't really provide you with any backstory on the characters or any reason to really care about them. And so I don't know, like, what do you feel on the game?
Yeah, I am very much in the mediocre camp. Like it's pleasant when you're playing it, but I have no desire to ever pick it up. Like I don't think about the only thing I think about it when I'm not playing or like have thought about it since playing is like how much I hate the menus. That's the only thing that's stuck with me. And that's not good. But I think it ties into your like, the characters are supposed to be a forefront. Like supposed to have this really like bright, colorful, edgy kind of style to it, and it just doesn't convey that well. Like the menus in this game are so hard to read, and it like I'm sure these are things that might get fixed, but like it's so bad to navigate. Like when you're in match choosing your champion, and it's supposed to be like the champions are matter and they all have like different abilities and stuff. And there's quite a few of them. So I'll
There
give
is
them
a
that. Like
lot.
there's a lot of variety, but when you're choosing your champion, it doesn't show you what their abilities do. So you have to go into like a different menu to see or like have previously read them all. And when you go in, the text is so small and it pops up in this tiny little corner. Meanwhile, the rest of the screen is like your character dancing and it's so bright and colorful and it's like so difficult to read the tiny little text box in the corner and it's just a UI nightmare. And, like
It is. It
that
seriously is.
that to me is the most interesting part of the game, which is very bad news. But like it feels fine to play. Like the driving is actually like decently responsive. And it definitely has like somewhat of a skill ceiling. Like it's kind of hard at first to be accurate with crashing into other cars. Um, and there's
I
some
find it's
characters that have like neat abilities, like you can go stealth and like maybe there's like some strategy to be built around that, but it's just not there's just not really feeling there's a lot of substance. And the other problem I have with it too is it doesn't feel like you're really like collaborating with your team as you're playing. It really felt very much like you're just kind of all doing your own thing.
Yeah, that's
And
what I was
then
gonna say for sure. Is
yeah.
because like something like this game is getting a lot of comparisons to like Rocket League because you're in cars, and Rocket League is soccer, and you have to work with your team. Like if I'm not in the net, like my buddy better be in the net, otherwise we're gonna get scored on, you know. And this game, there's very little like, okay, there's a guy coming around the right hand side, like you got to cut him off. Like you don't have to really coordinate with your team. You just kind of get put on a team and we're just kind of chatting as we play, and I hope our team collectively gets a better score than the other team by blowing each other's car up. And it's almost just like whichever team ends up having the more skilled players are just going to win. Like you can't out team. I mean, there probably is a meta, right, for people to get into it, and different game modes do probably have a bit more teamwork. Like there's the one mode where you have to blow cars up and collect the gears out of them, and then you have to go stand on one of the three different points. So I guess there's probably some strategy in terms of like all pushing the same control point at once, but that's one game mode, right? The rest more so comes down to just how well you can play as an individual and then add to your team score.
Yeah, what it really felt like to me is and like it's not unpleasant, right? Like it's not like I'm like having a bad time when I'm playing. Like we're being quite negative, and I think
Mm-hmm.
I we're being honest, which is important. But our main takeaway is that it's kind of bland. But the funny thing about it to me is it feels like a mini game in a bigger game. Like it feels almost kind of like a mode you'd play in Fall Guys as like one of those like team games or like maybe like a Mario Party mini game or it feels kind of like something like that and it would be great in one of those games where you just play a little bite size and then you're on to the next thing. But like to have the whole game and that's all it is like I'm not compelled to go play it, which is a shame because like party games, especially social games right now are like they're a great thing to be able to have, but I don't think I would ever pick this over a different choice if I'm going to sit down and play some games with a friend and like I'm definitely not playing it by myself.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of playing it by yourself, though, I did go online once by myself because there's a couple game modes. There's 4 different modes they have out right now, and 2 of them are actually locked to only playing the game single player. Which, first of all, I don't know about that because this game is not something I would want to sit and play by myself, like you said. But one of the single player modes, I don't know if you had a chance to check them out at all, but the one that's called Gridfall is actually pretty fun. It's it's a single player mode where pieces of the floor start falling out, and your goal is just to not fall through the floor. And so you're just, instead of having to kill people over and over again and kind of respawning, you're basically just trying to stay alive and knock people through the ground. And once people are eliminated, they're just gone. So that was actually kind of fun to go through. But again, once you play like 2 or 3 matches, there's not a lot of like complexity in terms of, oh, I'm gonna pick this character because of this certain ability. Like I don't know. I feel like going back to the abilities, like we're kind of all over the place, but it's like the abilities, it seems like they designed them without actually thinking about how they're going to affect the game. It's just like, oh, that would be a cool ability. Someone can have a fire trail, you know, like as they run around, they can leave fire behind them. Like that sounds cool. We'll put it in the game, and whether or not it really works towards what they're like accomplishing your team's victory or not, I don't know if it was really thought out too much. Maybe that's like not fair criticism, but I don't know. Like they just seem like they're just generic
Yeah.
abilities. There's nothing specific to like this game, right?
Yeah, it's not impactful, and that goes back to, like, I think the problem with it doesn't feel like it's cohesive with your team. Like, the whole point of these, like, different characters with different abilities on a team game is that you make some kind of, like, comp or strategy with your players, right? Like, in something like Overwatch, you take, like, like, someone with, like, a control, like Zarya CCs and, like, brings everyone together, and then, like, Reaper can go in and do, like, his AoE attack if everyone's, like, pulled into the same place, and, like, you have characters that, like, complement each other in different ways, and, like, one character is your tank, one character is your healer, like, you have to play with each other, and like who you pick drastically changes how your team functions. And that's, I think, like the exciting thing about these different characters. And also, like, it's you can kind of diversify and like see which character feels better for you because they're all very different to play. But then you get into something like this and it's like it just kind of almost feels like arbitrary which character you pick because like the differences are not
It's
very
very
impactful
minimal.
when you get into game. Yeah, they're very minimal. So I think that's the problem. They came up with a lot of characters and like some of them have nice designs.
A lot of them
Even
have
though
nice
like
design, just like on the face value of like what they look like. It's just tell me who this
mhm.
person is. Like, why should I care about them? Why do I want to pick them? Um,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. They don't
one
convey a lot of like being a real person. It's just sort of like a, like a cardboard cutout character, which like
yeah.
I guess is fine, but it's just there's no one aspect of the game that really like carries and elevates it into something a little bit more interesting. So,
Yeah, one point where I do want to shout it out though, in terms of the characterization, is that every character does have their own music, which is pretty cool. Like the base music is actually pretty catchy. I think is one of the stronger points of the game. It does get a bit repetitive just because there's not a lot of variety in the tracks, but like the music itself is pretty good. And when you hover your cursor over a character, you pick your character at the start of a match. Every character has kind of their own variation of whatever the theme song is. So one character, he's a biker, and he's kind of got like a heavy metal theme, and when you pick him, the theme of the music plays in like a heavy metal kind of riff or whatever, like his version of the music. And so I really like the individuality on that. And that's the kind of thing, like if they had customized each character in that way, to that extent, in like more different ways than just the music, I think they would be on their way to making it more meaningful. I don't know how much this game is really complete though. That's the other thing. Like it was supposed to be a
mhm.
full release a few months ago back on PlayStation for $80, and that would have been like a really bad look, I think, just like how, given the content and like how this game has kind of been received. But since it's PS Plus now and is free, like I think it can be forgiven for being a bit more bare bones now, and they'll have the opportunity to add to it, and build the player base up like as it goes. So I could see it becoming something a lot more fine tuned than it is right now, but it has a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, I agree. I would say right now it's a shell and maybe they can like No Man's Sky it and like turn it into something really beautiful. But right now it's just sort of like, it's the like day after Valentine's Day chocolates on sale. There's like one box of like Hershey's chocolate. It's not your favorite, but you're like,
You're like,
I'll
I
eat
can
it
eat this.
anyway.
It's fine. I can.
Yeah. You're like, well, this isn't gonna taste bad if I eat it.
Wow, that's a ringing endorsement if I've ever heard one.
Well,
Jeez.
change my mind. I am more than happy to have my mind changed.
Me too. And honestly, like I think this will be the kind of thing where whenever there's a major update, I'm not turned off by it enough not to maybe look into the update and check it out again. Because like you said, like a No Man's Sky situation would be awesome, because this game has potential to be fun, I think.
Yeah, like
Just
it's
gotta
it's a
get
cool
there.
concept and like the driving feels good, which is like the core thing that needs to work the most. So it just needs to build up the other aspects around that, and we'll see
Hmm.
what it's like in a
Hmm.
year.
All right, well, why don't we move along to our last game, Kate, of the PS Plus selection for February? I've been playing Control, and I know you haven't had a chance to really check it out, but I've played it probably. I'm estimating I'm getting close to maybe halfway through the game. I know it's not like the longest thing, but I've been really excited to check this out just because of the accolades it won back in 2019 and all of its praise for the ray tracing and kind of graphical prowess that it has. And man, the ray tracing is damn cool in this game, I must say. I've been playing on the performance mode more so I've been going for the 60 frames per second kind of bump in that way. So I haven't done a lot with the ray tracing on. But in the times when I have turned it on and kind of experimented, like, man, the light looks really cool in this game, and I have to say that first off. And just like the way that you can tell this game has a lot of thought put into it. Like, it's the kind of thing where if I'm shooting at a brick railing or something, the railing actually falls apart into different pieces, and then I can kind of pick those pieces up and use them as weapons with the telekinetic powers. Like, it all feeds into each other super well, all the systems. So I really, really appreciate that part of the game. So the story is actually really cool as well. I don't know how much you know about the story of Control, and I won't spoil it here just because I think a lot of people will get into the game now that it's on the PS Plus. But basically, it's like a psycho paranormal kind of story going on at this investigation headquarters called the Federal Bureau of Control, which is why it's called that. And your character kind of
Mhm.
comes in, and she's got some supernatural abilities, and she's kind of looking for her missing brother is kind of like the reason she's there, and he's also supernatural, which is why I guess they're both connected to this place. But there's a lot of like dark hallways and paranormal kind of like beings floating in the sky, and it's very unsettling, and it's actually pretty creepy as you go through. It's just very intense, right? Very sci-fi. That's maybe
Mhm.
one of my downfalls of this game is I don't find the environment overly interesting. Because it all takes place in this Federal Bureau of Control, which is like a big government building. And so you're spending a lot of your time kind of running down different hallways or going through this basement or going through different gray building type of environments. And so it does get a little bit repetitive here and there in terms of the way
Mhm.
it looks. There is some variability. Like, there's one area which I'm in which has a big tree growing up in the middle, and there's areas with different colors of light. Like, there's a lot of red kind of rooms. There's some other colors as well, but for the most part, it is very samey in its environment, which is maybe the biggest knock I have so far. Just because I don't know, given the subject matter and kind of some of the sci-fi elements they had, I think there might have been room for some more variation in terms of the way it looks. Um, but that being said, very fun to play. Cool mechanics feed on each other. Um, there's quite an extensive skill tree, a lot of different abilities you can get also. The abilities are found like by doing different side quests. So I feel like I've been kind of mainlining it a bit too much, and I need to go back and maybe explore some areas of the map that I'm not being taken to from the story, just to get some different abilities. Um, just because I feel like I probably should have a more expanded array of things I can do than I have right now. So
Right.
just to add some more variety to like what I can
Right. And
do.
some of the abilities look really cool. Like, I remember watching the trailers and stuff, and I've obviously like been trying to avoid spoilers and things, but like it's definitely a very like it's got some cool cinematic action to it with like being able to pick up stuff and like the physics simulations and whatnot, as well as the gunplay. Like it looks like a really cool game. And I'm glad you're enjoying it. Like, I really wanted to play it, and I was so excited when it came to PS Plus because now it's very convenient to play. But I didn't want to like sit down and only have a couple hours to play around with it. I wanted to wait until I can really like immerse myself and like dive into it and give it the time that it looks like it's gonna deserve. Um,
Yeah, I would recommend that for sure, especially since the story is confusing. There's a lot of like proper nouns and people you're kind of running into, and you're talking to a lot of them over like intercoms and not actually seeing them. So but before you meet them, so it gets a little bit confusing in terms of like remembering who's who in this the bureau and who's in charge of a certain department and all this kind of thing. So it's better for sure if you can do it more condensed, I would say.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, like the systems, like you were saying, they just feed into each other so well. Like, I'll be shooting with my gun and maybe running out of ammo a little bit. Like, my gun needs to recharge, so I'll use my last bullet to like break off the stone railing like I was talking about earlier. Then all of a sudden there's rocks on the ground, so I can now use my kind of telekinetic power to pick those up and start throwing those while my gun reloads. And just like the way that they layer on each mechanic and they kind of build is really cool. Like I have the ability now too to pick up objects off the ground and kind of swirl them around me as a shield. So I can now use I could hold the rocks around me for that and then shoot them off later as weapons when I need to. So just that kind of variety. It's a lot of flexibility in how you want to tackle the different engagements you get into, especially like your gun. You can change it around too. Like there's different versions. You can have like a standard pistol. There's one that's more of like a charged range option. There's a shotgun variation, but you can only carry so many at once. So you're kind of balancing all these different things and forming a bit of your own play style, which I like a lot. Especially I like to go from range a lot and kind of stay away from the enemies as much as possible. But there's also some melee, and I think you get the ability to fly later on too, which I've not gotten. But man, I can see how that would really change the game, especially in a lot of the exploration. Like there's a lot of verticality to some of these areas also, so I'm sure once I get that ability, it'll be a lot more exploration focused than it is now as well. But yeah, I'm excited to go back and finish it off for sure. Like it's been a great experience. I think that just because of all the praise the game got and all the accolades and everything, like maybe I'm not quite as blown away as I was expecting to be, but also I'm not at the end yet. I haven't seen all the abilities, but I am really enjoying it, and it's a great game. I would recommend. I would definitely say if you're planning to get a PS5 to wait and play it on the PS5. Don't play the PS4 version, because I think that was on PS Plus also, right? The PS4
Yeah,
version,
it was. Yeah, it was just Destruction All-Stars that was an exclusive.
yeah, right. So if you have the opportunity and you're planning to get the PS5, hopefully, fingers crossed, within the next little bit, I would say wait and play Control on there just to get that full experience. 60 frames a second, man, like it runs nice. So yeah, recommend it. But anyways, Kate, I think that does it for the games we've been playing. So why don't we take a quick break, get some water? We'll come right back and talk about the news right after this. So don't go anywhere. Hello. We are back for the second part of the show where we will be covering the news from the last little bit. And the first thing we got to talk about, Kate, is the Blizzcon Metallica performance. Like we talked about at the top of the show. Man, what a debacle this turned into.
Oh my god. I can't believe that this happened. The funniest part about this is, so okay, so you haven't seen it, first of all, the first thing you should do is just go YouTube, look this up, Metallica BlizzCon Twitch, it'll pop up. But so they had Metallica show up for performance, and they played For Whom the Bell Tolls. It was awesome, obviously. But then because Twitch has their copyright stuff and they're so predatory about it, apparently if you're watching on Twitch, it took the song out and replaced it with this elevator music.
It was just
So that
lo-fi kind of bells.
Yeah, so that it wouldn't play copyright music, obviously not realizing it's the goddamn band playing it live.
Man, you got to see the video though. Just go look it up. It's all over. But
It's
I don't
so
usually
funny.
read a lot of quotes from the article, news articles while we're talking about the news here, but there's some that are really, really funny. I want to shout out Gabe Gerwin over at GameSpot, who writes the following title for his article. Metallica's BlizzCon performance ruined by Twitch, with the subtitle, "The legendary thrash metal band had its audio replaced by delicate little bells." How cute. How cute.
It's so wholesome. And then he goes on to say yeah, right in the middle of one of its songs, the audio was replaced by some easy listening bell music.
It's just a really funny scene. It reminds me, we were talking just offline before we were recording about that clip that kind of goes around on the internet from time to time of, it's all the goth people that are kind of dancing outside, but then people put Christmas music or some Thomas the Train theme song over top. It's just killer funny. It really is.
It's so good. Yeah, because they're rocking out, and then it's this nice little bell jingle. I
Yeah.
can't believe oh my god. I bet they're cracking up. I bet they I mean partially it must be frustrating, but I bet you there's so much humor in that too. And the funny part is I watched their performance. I didn't watch all of BlizzCon. But I knew a couple of people who were watching it, and when Metallica came on, they messaged me right away. They're like, "You gotta turn it on, like, it's Metallica,"
Hmm,
like,
hmm.
and so I did, and I watched it, but I watched it on Blizzard's actual website,
Yeah,
so
right.
it
So you would have
played
got the
perfectly
concert.
fine for me. I didn't hear about this until, like, like, the next morning, which made it so much funnier in, like, the contrast of, like, I actually heard their performance.
Yeah, yeah. Also, what's funny about this is BlizzCon just happened, and instead of talking about any of the actual Blizzard announcements, we're talking about the Metallica performance. So maybe that says something about
Actually,
our Blizzard game interest. But I
what's
mean, they had
what's
some
funny.
Overwatch 2 announcements, kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
I'm looking forward to Overwatch 2, and, like, there was some good stuff. I know, there's a big WoW update, which a friend of mine is excited for, and, there's some Diablo stuff, like a remaster for 2
yeah,
and a
a
new
new
class for
class in
4, so I
Diablo
know
4.
people are excited about that, but I don't think we're not huge Blizzard people. What's funny is I actually play a lot of, um, Heroes of the Storm, which is Blizzard, but Heroes of the Storm did not get mentioned in the slightest.
Yeah, I
It's
think it's like
like,
shutting down, isn't it? They're not really updating it
well,
too much.
they kind of are updating it, like, a new character came out, like, maybe a month ago, like, they are still
Mm.
supporting it, but it's, like, definitely kind of, like, in it's,
Is
like,
their
the
B
weird
tier of
step.
properties for
Yeah,
sure.
it's their beaches are weird, like, stepkid just, like, hanging out in the other room, like, maybe it's not invited to Christmas dinner, but, like, they did send a card.
Jesus.
Like, it's like, they still have it, and I think, like, you were talking about that in my group after we actually played some Heroes of the Storm last night after BlizzCon, and, like, all the characters right now are free to play. Um, it's one of those, like, MOBAs where, like, you buy the characters and you only have access, and there's, like, usually, like, 10 or so that are free in a rotation, but, like, for BlizzCon right now, everyone's free, so, like, it has been acknowledged, I guess, in that way, and, like, they're doing, like, an event in game, which is kinda cool, and we were talking about it, we're like, we almost, like, think that the game is kind of better for not being in tons of spotlight because, like, it's sort of just, like, the casual experience, and they're not, like, trying to pump it up to be this huge esport anymore, which is kind of why we're not as into some of the other MOBA offerings, so we're kinda
That's a good
happy with
point.
with the state it's at. But it is kind of funny that, yeah, like, all their other games got a shout out and HOTS is just sort of sitting in the corner.
Kate, why don't we move along and talk about the Nintendo Direct? Because this is obviously the biggest news that's come out of kind of gaming in the last little couple of weeks. Honestly, like this, like I said before, I think it's been 530 days. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone that's listening, but it's been
Mhm.
some outrageous amount of time since we've had a real Direct. So there's been a lot of announcements as well. I think we're not going to go through the whole Direct. Where maybe let's just shout out some of the things that we really liked. Of course, Triangle Strategy as well. We're going to be talking about for the third part of the show. So we'll gloss over that for now. But I personally want to just say that I'm really happy to see Splatoon 3 get announced. I
Mhm.
know we didn't really see too much about the game, and it's very much one of those things. Like, of course, we know they were making Splatoon 3. Splatoon's become one of the most prominent Nintendo franchises, honestly, over the past few years. So Splatoon 3 is nice. It looks like they're really changing up the setting of it with the new kind of desert cowboy type of location. Seems pretty cool. I mean, I can't. I'm interested to see what they're adding once they give more information on it. But just to know they're working on it, it's coming out, I guess, next year, 2022. So that's nice to see. Looking forward to Splatoon 3.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, there was actually quite a lot they went over. I think, like, the big standout for me is obviously Triangle. There
Hmm.
was, like, some things that there was a lot of, like, stuff getting, like, coming to Switch that I didn't realize wasn't on it yet, like, Fall Guys is coming to Switch,
Yeah, and
and, like,
Xbox as well.
yeah,
It
and,
was
like,
only on PlayStation
Apex.
up till now.
Yeah, and, like, Apex Legends is coming. There's, like, a few games and, like, Tales from the Borderlands. There's a few games like, "Oh, I didn't know that they weren't on Switch yet." And, like, Fall
Yeah,
Guys is, like, it's got the perfect home on Switch, I think. Like, as great as it was on PlayStation, it was so nice to have it for PS Plus, like, it should live on the Switch.
that handheld nature is perfect for something like Fall Guys. Just laying in bed and having a match, like that's way more appealing than going actually and like sitting in your on your couch and like setting everything up. And it's definitely like a handheld game for sure.
Mhm. Yeah,
I want to shout out the
the other.
Famicom Detective Club as well. Those two
Yes.
Ace Attorney s games. I guess I've never really even heard of this before, to be honest. But I guess they're like retro kind of detective visual novel type games, which is right up my alley, obviously. So I'm definitely
Yeah.
excited to check those out.
That was the other thing that kind of interested me. It was funny 'cause, they had a game too that's, by the Danganronpa devs.
Yes,
I can't think of what it was called, but it was like,
World's End Club, right?
yeah,
World's
World
End
End,
Club, yeah.
and I we saw that, and I was actually watching it with the person I'm playing Danganronpa with, so obviously both of us kinda, like, sat up in our seat, and we're like, "Oh, what? Spike Chunsoft?" And Yeah, it doesn't really have that same kind of feel to it, and it also looks like it's sort of, toned down a bit, like, more for, like, a younger audience, and it's a little bit more, like, action versus like, detective, visual novel kind of style. So we were a little bit, like, like, we fizzled a little bit on that game, but then when the 2 old detective games came out, we're like, "Oh, that's a little bit, like, more filling that niche we were looking for," so we it kind of, like, softened that blow for us, and we got it excited about that instead. So I think like that maybe is my second most anticipated thing from the direct.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it was yeah Splatoon for sure, but I also think Mario Golf is something I'm really interested in too, especially since they showed I guess that this game has some kind of story mode with experience sliders and different power ups and whatnot. Obviously, going to hold some reservation until we actually see what that means because that they said that that stuff was going to be in Mario Tennis that came out a couple years ago on Switch also, and that game ended up having yeah sure it had a single player mode, but it was basically just a bunch of kind of shallow challenges strung together. Like there wasn't really a whole lot of substance. So I'm hoping that this game kind of learns from that and they add actually some more of an established like fully fleshed out single player type thing to complement the multiplayer because if they had something like that Mario Golf for sure is definitely piquing my interest but it depends on the
The
content level.
Yeah, my takeaway from Mario Golf is that I wasn't interested, and then they had that mode that was like speed mode. Everybody plays it once, and it's golf mayhem, and I thought like that would be a fun couch game to play
I
for
think so
sure.
too. Yeah, the problem
That
is like
mode looked amazing.
is that worth spending like full price on the game though, right? Because unless it
Yeah,
has other substance, like it's just one of those things where yeah, I'd love to play it, but I'm not gonna get $80 worth of enjoyment out of that
yes,
mode. You know, like I need to have
absolutely.
enough to sit down and justify paying that much.
Absolutely, 100%. This is the kinda game that makes me, like, disappointed that video game rentals aren't a thing anymore, because, like, I would love to rent it for a weekend, and then I'm done playing. So, like,
Yeah,
it's not worth buying it for that weekend, but it would probably be fun to, like, have a night of, like, playing ridiculous, stupid speed golf, and, like, you're about to win, and you're, like, putting it in, and then, like, Waluigi just runs over from, like, over the green hill, and, like,
yeah,
he's here now too, and just dunks the ball in the hole, and, like, that would be so fun, but, it's not $80 worth of fun for one night
yeah,
probably,
yeah.
so
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, other than that, there wasn't a whole ton that really made a lot of waves for me. Neon White had kind of a cool art style. Don't really know what that game is though, so we'll have to wait and see. But it's interestingly enough, it's from the developer of Donut County, which I just spoke about on the show the
Mhm.
other time. So that's kind of cool tie-in. I'll check it out. I like Donut County, but I'm not definitely not like I wouldn't say hyped for it at this point.
Yeah, I
Other
guess
than
the
that,
last thing that we have to bring up, like, kind of is big news. I know it's not super relevant for you, but, they did mention, obviously everyone's expecting some Breath of the Wild 2 news because we know it's been in development and, it's an anniversary for Zelda this year, so, they even addressed it. They showed up and they were like, yeah, you probably want some Breath of the Wild news. We can't
yeah,
tell you
too
about
bad,
it.
too bad.
Sorry. Oopsies." But there is a HD port for Skyward Sword, which think looking back on it now, aside from Breath of the Wild, it was actually the newest game, even though it feels quite old now.
Yeah,
So that's getting
2011, right?
ported.
It came out.
Yeah, so that's getting ported. I don't know if I'll get it, but I do really like the Joy Cons for it. Like they've come out with a new Joy Con, and like one is looks like it's based off of like the Master Sword, and the other one's the Hylian Shield. So like they actually look really cool. Um,
Hmm. Yeah,
but
I agree for sure. And the game, it looks like they ported it really well. Like I know a lot of people have conflicted opinions on Skyward Sword. It's probably one of the more controversial entries in the Zelda franchise, I guess. I don't know if I'm getting that right, but that's kind of my read on it. But the remaster looks pretty good, and I like the way they've adapted it so you don't have to use the motion controls. And it looks like, I mean, kind of weird using the right stick for the sword, but I'm sure you could adapt to it and get pretty used to it
yeah,
quickly.
that interests me. Like, I mean, obviously, it's gonna depend how it feels, but like that one detail kind of piqued my interest in the way that like it almost kind of reminds me of like there's a lot of those like Steam like medieval fighting games now where it's like you have to choose your stance and like it's like really specific for how you swing your sword, and this is maybe a little bit more of like a simplified version, but like it looks
Mm-hmm.
like it could feel pretty satisfying. So yeah, we'll see.
Agreed. Yeah, the last one I want to shout out is I've never heard of this game either, and it's apparently an older one, and it is the Saga Frontier remastered, which is I guess it's kind of like a precursor to Octopath in a way. It's like 8 protagonists, 8 captivating journeys. Like this to me sounds exactly like what Octopath was based on, and I thought that game was the first to do something like that, but I guess not, because Saga Frontier is an older game. They're remastering it, so maybe that will be something cool to check out. But it depends. I mean, wait for reviews, see what it's like, right? Watch some.
Mm-hmm. There's a
Um,
lot of those too. Like Nintendo's on like a play our whole library, but in a new way kick. Like every almost seems like every second game is like it's this classic game brought back to life. And like
yeah,
I guess
right.
that's great, but it's also like, the offerings are very much like I hope you like classic games. Like there's all these like Ninja Gaiden collection and like Capcom arcade, like old school games and like Tales or a Secret of Mana SNES game remastered.
Yeah,
Like
so
it's
true.
very like they're feeling very nostalgic these last couple of years.
It's so true. So what was your feeling on the direct overall then? I know it's been so long. It's been like personally for me, I feel like it was actually a pretty decent show. Like we didn't even talk about the Smash Bros announcement with Pyra and Mithra joining from Xenoblade. Neither of us have played Xenoblade, so I mean maybe not the most
Hmm.
meaningful selection to us. And it is another anime character with another sword, so people
I
are up in
think
arms about that. But
I think she's an
they,
anime character. She is technically a sword,
yeah, true.
so
It's even
I
more.
don't know that makes it better or not. Yeah, I'm pretty neutral. She's yeah, like I've never played Xenoblade. Funny enough, the
Yeah,
only thing I know about Xenoblade, and I know that it's really well received, but the only thing I've really like seen about it is like it got a lot of attention in the media for being like having some controversy with it being like very sexualized for its
yeah,
female characters, and kind of like offensive in that way to women, and which is interesting because like for a JRPG to be called out on that, it's kind of like
yeah. It's like what
a little
JRPG doesn't
extreme.
have those elements in some way or another,
Yeah,
you know?
so it
Not that it's
is quite
acceptable, obviously.
yeah, but it's quite pronounced in that game. So I thought it was sort of interesting that like they still picked that game. They didn't shy away from it, even though it's been quite controversial, and they have like censored the design of both characters a little bit.
Yeah, for Smash though, right?
S For
Yeah.
Smash specifically, yeah, not in the base game, so I guess, like, it surprised me I didn't expect the game for that reason, but it is a really big series and, a lot of people really really think it's the best entry in it, so I guess
Yeah,
it makes
yeah.
sense, but yeah, I wasn't it was not a pick I was expecting, but I'm very, I guess, neutral towards it.
Yeah, same here. Same here. And I think I'm neutral towards the direct in general. Like I wouldn't say anything here was announced that really, really blew me away, but it's a potential for a lot of things that are gonna be a hit for me at the same time. Like the RPGs we've talked about, and I'd like to check out Apex on the Switch. Like if it runs well enough, like I'm as you know, I'm big into Apex, so having that on a handheld or like another system would be great. Splatoon, if that comes out being something that ends up being like more single player fleshed out or even more just the same multiplayer, like I really enjoy that. So for me, I really enjoyed this direct overall. Like neutral to enjoy it, I guess I would say, but I know a lot of people have kind of like a disappointment around it, especially since it's been so long, and maybe they had some different ideas of these crazy hype Smash character announcements and like Sora and all this. So I don't know. I just hope that people didn't overhype themselves too much, and at least can find something that was
Yeah.
of interest
I
to
I
them.
think I think with it being, like, so long in between, you're kind of, like, doomed to fail in that kind of way, right? And then also I think, like, a lot of people were Breath of the Wild 2 was really what they were looking for,
Yes,
and
yeah.
to not get news on that is a bit of a letdown.
They
Um,
did confirm they're going to talk about it, I think, for the second half of the year, though, right?
yeah, they did say it's coming soon, and obviously, we've been over this before. It's better to wait and have it done right, but I do understand a little bit of, like, I mean, as an Elden Ring survivor over
Yeah,
here, I
Jesus.
understand what it's like to wait with no news. But yeah, then it was the direct. It's exciting to get one, and hopefully we'll get one in a little bit sooner than another 500 days.
Let's hope so.
But maybe we'll take a quick break and come back to go over Triangle strategy project shapes are fun in a few
Working
minutes.
title, yeah, right. We'll see. We will. Well, let's do just that, Kate. We'll be back in just a sec and talk about triangle strategy. All right, everyone, welcome back to the third and final section of the show, where we are going to be breaking down our thoughts more on Project Triangle Strategy, brackets working title, Square Enix's new tactical
we'll
turn-based game.
we'll see.
We'll see. But yeah, this game, like we had mentioned before, was part of the Nintendo Direct from I guess yesterday, a couple days ago, whenever the hell it was.
The
But
17th.
the 17th, yeah. So they dropped a demo for this game right after the show it became available. We both played it, and as big Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced fans, spoilers, that game probably will be showing up on the next episode for our top 25.
Very likely, yes.
But this game looks like basically a spiritual successor to that style of game. It's being made by Square Enix. Probably, I'm guessing a lot of the people on the team, or at least some of the people on the team, are probably people who have worked on Final Fantasy Tactics, because this game is a heck of a lot of similarities, and seems to have really improved on that formula too. So I'm personally like blown away by this demo. Obviously, it is a demo. They're gonna flesh some stuff out. You know, a lot to be added still, and I think there's like a survey they mentioned that was going to take in user feedback, which is
Yeah,
kind of
they
cool.
did say at the end of the reveal, they're like, and then when they said that the demo was coming out, they're like, we want you to give feedback, which is, I always think that's a good sign, right?
Totally, yeah, and the demo itself, like it was great. It's everything I would have wanted in like a new version of Final Fantasy
It's
Tactics. There's some cool mechanics they've added in.
it's like more than what I expected. I am so blown away by this, and it's funny because I've seen a lot of people talking about it, and they're comparing it to like Fire Emblem because that's also like a tactics game in the same like kind of grid base. Like you have like a bunch of units, and it's not like
Yeah, turn
in the regular
orders.
like turn-based combat. It's the actual like top-down tactics on a board
Yeah,
kind of game. But what's funny to me is like I really don't get a Fire Emblem vibe from it.
neither do I.
The game it reminds me of more is Divinity. And if you've ever listened to the show, you know how highly acclaimed I think that game is, and how like it's such a top tier experience. And this game is one of the first games I've ever played that reminds me of it. And it's just because there's so much depth to the combat. Like Final Fantasy Tactics is like a holy grail game. It was so good. It's a game, we played so much when we were younger. I've gone back and played it as an adult and still thought it was phenomenal. It's a great game. But this game, like, it just sort of took that system and like ran away with it. Like, there's so much going on. Like, like height, you do more damage if you have a height advantage. You do more damage if you like attack from behind an enemy. If you have multiple characters in melee, like they'll get follow-up attacks because you're sort of like ganged up on them. There's like an element system where it interacts. Like if you use fire, it'll light grass on fire if it's there, and then if you use water, it'll put out the fire. But then if something's wet, it gets electrocuted more easily. And then there's ice, which melts to the fire, and it's such an intricate like system to make like to combo stuff, and like the environments are going to play such a part in the game
Yeah,
play, which like is something like Final Fantasy Tactics is great. And I think there was the elevation, there was some height involved, but like where you were fighting didn't really affect
yeah,
the
not in the
gameplay
same way
that
as
much.
this. Not in the same way
um
as this.
yeah,
And
whereas
this
this
has
seems
like
like
other things too, like there's those totems around the city for one of the missions you're on, and you have to interact with them, and they light certain buildings on fire, and you use them as like environmental hazards, which didn't really exist too much in those older games as well. So
mhm.
so I found that really cool. I also found just the class system to be so much more elevated in this game. Like even just though it's a demo, the variety of the classes really seem to be improved in this. Like in terms of especially support classes, I found like in the other tactics game, like Final Fantasy Tactics obviously is way older than this, so it's not maybe the most fair. But a lot of the classes are just different attackers, right? There's the knight, there's the summoner and the mage and all that. But in this game, there's like a lot of different support classes, like a guy like one of the tacticians, I think he was like he literally just buffs and your defense or your attack on your characters, and there's other characters that just help charge your meters more. Like they're not all just based on offense, which I really liked. Even the magicians, like the sorcerer you get, like he has an attack, but then you can also make like a wall of ice or to as like an obstacle instead of just dealing damage. So there's a lot in terms of like positional strategy and like buffing your characters a lot more than in the other older games.
Yeah, absolutely. And the mana system is really interesting in this game as well. So like each you have your basic ability, which I think seems like it's determined based on what weapon you have, which is cool. Like the guy who uses a lance attacks two squares in front of him because a lance is like long range,
Mhm.
whereas like a guy with a sword only hits one.
Yeah.
But then
That
you have
was in
your
Tactics as well, I think, right? With the lances. I bel
it
that
might
was
have
that
it
was.
yeah, I think it might have been. But then you have like your abilities based off of your class, and like they might have a certain mana cost, and it seems like you get 1 mana back per turn. So like if you have an expensive ability, you have to play around that and like know the right time to use that. And then also like if you're saving up mana, you can't spend it on a smaller ability because then you'll never make it to the like 3 mana threshold or whatever it is for using a like a stronger
Mhm,
ability.
mhm.
But what's cool is I noticed like some of the mana reliant classes like the fire mage, for example, they have ways of getting more. So she'll get one per turn, but she also gets an extra mana back if she kills a unit. So like playing around those kind of like conditional things seems really cool. You can kind of like chain strong attacks into strong attacks if you are fulfilling that condition, which in that case is a kill.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. And then I think my favorite character, like there's all the classes like feel very different, which I like. But I think my favorite one is the spy class, and so it's kind of like a sneaky rogue sort of guy. But usually on your turn you get like you can move and do an action. So usually like move and do one thing like attack or heal or shoot a spell. But the thief, he can do 2 actions on his turn. He only gets 1 move still, but he can do 2 actions. So it's cool. So like if you're in a good position, you can like double attack with him, or he has an ability to go invisible
Yeah,
and do
yeah.
like a
He was
stealth.
useful.
So it's cool. Like you can kind of like put him in sort of a risky spot, attack, but then also go into stealth. And like he was kind of a neat character, and I was using the tactician to like buff his damage because he gets to go twice a turn. So there's more value. And there's just like even in the demo with like a limited amount of like and preset characters, there was a lot of like my brain was firing off with like, oh, and this character goes with this, and like you can combo that, and then if I make this element, then like the fire can come in later, and it was just there
Yeah,
was such a surprising amount of depth to just the combat. It was fantastic.
I totally agree with that too. I was using a similar strategy. There's the one guy, I think he's like a shield bearer or something, but he's the tank and he can provoke enemies and get them to target him. So I was doing the same kind of thing where I would bring him. I actually hasted him with one of my support classes so he would move up the turn order. So I went in and I provoked like 3 archers in a little group all towards him. And then I brought in my magician or like the sorcerer or whatever he was who has no defense, but just because they're all focusing on the shield guy, and I'd buffed his defense with the other character, and just like this setup I had going on, which was really synergizing the characters together in terms of like this guy's supposed to take damage, that's what he's gonna do. This person's gonna
Mhm.
heal, and they're gonna work together exactly how I'm planning this out. And I really felt like the game has different ways you could tackle that depending which characters you bring too, because you unlock a couple characters throughout the demo and you could choose
Mhm.
not to bring, like if you didn't want to focus on like it's not worth having this support class, like I need to bring some more power, or I don't want the tank, I just want to bring in another you know healer or something, right? Just to change how you're playing and like what kind of strategy you want to use. I really like that, and I feel like even just this demo did such a good job of showing the diversity of the characters and like the scope of different ways you can fight enemies depending like who you want to bring.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think that's, like, one of the main reasons, like, I like Fire Emblem, don't get me wrong, it's a franchise I've followed for a long time, and I liked some of the things they did with Three Houses, and I enjoyed the game, but I never finished it, I kind of fell off of it, and I think part of the problem I have with that game is that it just isn't as much depth in the combat. Like, a lot of the classes are cool, and I like the unit types, and, there are these really big battles, that kind of feel more like a war than just little skirmishes here and there. But I find that like the characters are quite linear in what they do. Like an archer just does one thing,
Yeah.
and your your all the units just have like one very clear single strength, and that's it. That's all they are. And I guess like the strategy is more of like how you like which characters you choose to bring and how you position them on the battlefield. But it's like I find that all the matches kind of play out in a similar kind of way.
Yeah, and it's hard
And
to say like this might end up being similar too. Like we've only played the demo, but the sense
yeah,
is for sure that it's not. It's a little bit more involved in terms of its strategy.
yeah, but I just find like in Fire Emblem, like I get sort of tired of the battle partway through because there isn't that like extra layer of depth to it. And like it doesn't necessarily need it to be a successful game, but I think this just interests me more. Like I feel like I'm going to be a bit more engaged because instead of doing the same kind of like turn every time, you're constantly doing different things. And if your enemy does something like, oh, they've lit that piece of grass on fire because they hit me with like a fire base attack, then it's like, oh shit, like do I try to turn that to my advantage, or like do I use some rain to put it out? Like it just seems like there's going to be a lot more like variables that sort of like influence your decision making, and you're going to be making a lot more like decisions on a turn by turn basis, as opposed to just like, oh, if I put my unit there, do they die? Yes or no? Okay, don't put them there. Whereas this is like, well, fuck, like they're there, but like, maybe I have a few ways of kind of like mitigating
Yeah,
the
yeah,
danger that they're in. So
yeah.
I am 100% on board. I think this sort of system is like exactly what I personally like um
Yeah,
in
I'm
a
right there
game.
with you. I'm right there with you too. And we haven't even talked about the other big aspect of this game and how it's different than the other tactic games before it as well, because of the story portion. This game is not a linear story that you're working through, similar to like a previous Tactics or a Fire Emblem. This is, well, I mean, some of the Fire Emblems, I guess, have diverging stories, but I digress. This game has like actual, like a voting system built into it. So there's going to be junctures in the story where you have to make a decision. So one in the demo, the decision is, hey, do we give away? I think this guy, his name is Roland, right? The prince, and he's
Yeah.
one of your units. And your decision is, hey, like the enemy wants this guy. Do we give him away and kind of mitigate having to maybe fight or like sacrifice him for the greater good, or do we fight and stick with him and defend our guy and defend the town and give up maybe the fact that we have to fight these people and they're going to come invade us, but we're going to defend our guy. And
Right,
so
yeah, it's
each
basically like, there's gonna be a lot of casualties if we fight in this place that we're holed up in, like, a lot of innocent people will die. Is that worth, keeping this prince safe, or do we just kind of give up the prince and, like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Exactly.
not
But
suffer this damage?
the interesting part of this though is that you don't just make that decision. Your character is one of your whole party is basically this group of people that work together, and they each get a single vote in what they want to happen in the situation. So you only have one vote out of however many, like 9 or 10 people. And so the way it works is, as you go around and you can have a conversation with different people in your party, and depending kind of what you've investigated around town and what kind of information you've picked up, you can sometimes sway their opinion. And then when the vote happens, some of them might have a more concrete opinion, like no, we definitely need to defend Roland, right? Or some other people might be more on the fence. And then when everyone actually goes and submits their vote, only then will you actually know like what direction your party's moving and what your objective will be and where the story's going to go. And I really like the fact that you can kind of have an influence on it, depending like who you choose to persuade and kind of who you're working with. But then also it does have that element of like, no, like the people you've surrounded yourself with in your playthrough have a certain viewpoint on this situation, and no matter what you do, like you're just that's what's going to happen, because it's not all up to you. And I really think that's a cool system, and kind of taking a bit of the control out of the player's hands in a way, but it might feel even more organic in terms of like your character's motivations.
Yeah, 100%. Like this part to me too is like I was sold based just on the tactics gameplay, but oh my god, was I not expecting such an interesting system. Like this to me is so interesting. Like because your party's going to be different too, right? Depending on which characters you pick. So if you pick characters that have like you want to pick them for their abilities in combat, but also like you want to jive with their personalities too, because there's going to be
Yeah.
a lot of conflict. And what's really interesting is like this system's going to live and die based on how good the writing is, but it has so much potential. Like it was really cool going around because I wanted to influence everyone to protect the prince.
Yeah,
That
so
was
did
the
I.
choice
Okay,
I
I was
went
gonna ask
for.
you what you did, but yeah, I
Yeah.
protected him too.
That's what I went for, and, there were some that were on the fence, some were really strongly feeling one way or the other, and when you talk to them, you can influence them with a dialogue choice. You get a few different things, you kinda hear a bit of their concern, or how they're feeling, and then you get a choice of, like, a few different things to say, and some people I was successful influencing, and some people, they didn't get swayed by what I'd said because it wasn't the right choice. And I really got the feeling that like had I have approached them in a different way, it might have been more or less successful. Like you get it was really cool, like you said, like when you if you investigate and explore, you can get additional dialogue options because like you've learned something new that you didn't know before that now could be like an angle to bring up. But I noticed I tried the, like, new information I'd received on 2 different characters, and one of them was susceptible to it, and they're like, "Oh, that makes sense." Like, it was kind of like a new strategy I'd come up for the battle. So it was
Yeah.
sort of telling them like, "Oh, yeah, the battle's gonna be dangerous, but there's this, like,
There's a new
aspect to the
weapon or
town."
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, there's, like, new weapon, there's this new, like, strategy we could use that, would put the battle in our favor, so it won't actually be as dangerous as we initially thought, and that swayed one character because he was kind of looking at it from, like, a tactical kind of, like, almost more of like a numbers kind of aspect, but then when I use that same, dialogue on a different character, he didn't care about it because that's not what his stance was. His stance was, like, even sacrificing one person is too many, so the idea of, like, mitigating it a little bit or, like, being more strategic, he didn't resonate with that because that wasn't what his problem was in the first place.
Yeah, I had the
So
same exact experience, like, exactly your
I
situation was the same thing, so I like
That's
that too
awesome.
because it's not as easy as just saying, "Well, this is the information I've unlocked. This must be what I have to say to convert this person's opinion."
Yeah,
But really,
exactly,
like,
like, it
you
isn't.
have to get to know your people as well and, like, know what might change their opinion or what their viewpoint on different things are, like,
Yeah,
you really
exactly,
need to
like
seem to get to know these characters and, like,
mhm.
I think that
Exactly.
seems
This
neat, but
this
like you
option
said.
isn't just inherently better because it was hard to unlock. It was just like, like that character is a person. You have to understand who they are and who you're talking to. And like, to harken back to Divinity, it very much is like that too. Like there's a lot of like conversing and like, maybe you can get around a conflict by like appealing or bribing in some way, but like you gotta bribe them with the right thing because that person, like has their own personality
Mhm,
and they
mhm.
don't care about like maybe you can't buy some people with money, but you could buy them with like, well, I know that, I've got some dirt on you and I can bribe you that way. Like there's a lot of like nuance to it and you really have to be like invested in paying attention. And like I love so much the idea of you vote and you get outvoted by your team. And now you got to
Yeah,
deal with
yeah.
this situation. Like it depends, like, I don't know how easy it will be to convince everyone, and, like, maybe you can kind of, like, steer it whichever way you want, but, like, I love so much the idea of being, like, that "Oh, shit" moment of, like, it came down to that last vote, and that guy voted against me, and now, like, I've been swung into the situation I didn't expect to be in, and now, like, I'm
Yeah,
I'm gonna be
yeah.
playing this out, like, it has so much potential to be such an organic and interesting experience versus just, like, classic JRPG good guys versus bad guys kind of story.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, like, I hope they can find a good balance between letting you have enough agency over what happens versus being able to just sway everyone's opinion whenever you want. Like, I really hope it's a good balance of you get a lot of the choices you want, but occasionally you do get outvoted. Like, I don't want it to be frustrating either way, right? Because if it's too easy, you can just influence anyone the way you want. It would be meaningless. And then if it's just really hard and you get outvoted all the time, I feel like that would not be enjoyable either because you wouldn't really experience like the part of the game that you want to see. So I mean, I have faith they're going to balance it and they'll get it right, but it's just something to think about, I guess. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know. The only part of the game I would say I was a bit let down by, just to finish up my thoughts, would be I think the voice acting was not great.
Oh, the
Um,
voice acting was hardcore bad.
hardcore
It was
bad.
very much like anime English dub, like, not great.
Yeah, especially the main character. Like the guy just has this monotone voice, and I don't know about you. Maybe this is just some weird thing I picked up on, but he has some. Whenever he exclaims and gets a bit more excited, he has this weird Sonic type quality to his voice. Like I hear Sonic the Hedgehog coming through, and that really threw me off.
I will not be able to look it in the same. This is the kind of game I would be surprised if this game didn't come out with, like, "Would you like to play it in English or Japanese?"
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
that's the solution. Because yeah, there were a couple characters that were fine, but there were definitely a couple characters, especially the main character, that was just like, "This is rough."
Yeah, but even the ones that had good performance, I feel like they kind of stood out the other way because everyone else was not great. And so
Right, it
like I
makes
found the tactician, like the old guy, I think he was all right, but he was just such a strong presence in his voice is really that like wise old man voice and it stood out against the other characters that were like generic anime guy number 2.
Yeah. The problem with the voice acting in these games, and, like, I almost, like I know a lot of people like it, so it's good to include it, and you can always, like, choose to turn it off, but I don't like it so much because like, it always feels kind of, like, awkward because, like, you're cycling the text, like, as
Much
you're pressing
faster,
A,
right?
right? Like, you're not just listening to it, you're reading it, and so, like, the flow of the conversation is always awkward because it's like they're waiting for you to press A for the next person to speak, so there's always this kind of, like, weird, unnatural pauses between characters from time to time, and, like, I was just like, I don't know, I like these kind of games, like, I'm happy just to read the text myself and, like, that's fine, or if they're gonna speak it, like, make it a kind of like a cutscene where I don't have to, like, influence
Yeah,
it so
yeah,
that it can,
yeah.
like, flow a little bit better, but,
Agreed.
I mean, that's minor, you can, play it in Japanese is probably
We'll
what I'll
we'll get
do.
over it, and we will not have to worry about it because this game, I guess, in 2022 is probably one of our most anticipated. And voice acting or not, I think it looks awesome. Can't wait.
100% agree.
All right. Well, Kate, why don't we move along to the last part of the show, which is, of course, listener mail. We answer a listener mail question at the end of every show. Sometimes a longer form discussion. This one's just going to be a bit quicker. But if you would like to submit a question to us for next time, please email us at circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com. We've gotten into the habit also of putting out a tweet before every episode, just kind of asking for any questions. So if you'd rather go on Twitter at CNSPod and just reply to that to our thread or give us a tweet with a question, that's great as well. But today's question, Kate, if you could turn a book or movie into a video game, which would you pick and why?
Okay, I will go first. I mine came to me like basically immediately, and I was 100% into it. But it was funny because I looked it up. I didn't think there were any games. I'd never heard of them, but there actually are a couple. I think 2008 was the last one that was made though. So I picked Avatar: The Last Airbender,
There's an
which was
Avatar
that
video
like
game?
yeah, right? I was surprised. But it's that, that really famous Nickelodeon I guess it's technically a cartoon. It's sort of like an anime, but it is made in the States, so it's technically a cartoon. But it is awesome. It is, I'm sure most people don't need to know what it is. It's very highly acclaimed and it's a wonderful show. But the world is really cool because you have like the different nations and they're all based off around like different elements and they're all based off of like different kind of like cultures and it's more like Asian focused, which is interesting because a lot of games specifically, like, we've had some other stuff, like, there's been, like, like, Vikings are really big right now, and we had the shinobi stuff, and, like, had Ghost of Tsushima and Sekiro and stuff like that, but, like, a lot of, bigger kind of, like, fantasy games do tend to be more of, like, a Western
Mm-hmm.
fantasy
Mm-hmm.
sort of setting, so I thought this would be a really cool world to kind of explore, and, like, it would make a really good MMO where you could kind of, like, create your character, and you'd be from one of these different nations, with, like, a
Yeah,
different,
different
like,
bender.
bending and I thought that would be really cool, and, like, it'd just be a really nice world to explore, and, like, there's a lot of lore and a lot of, like, different locations that are visited in the show or at least, like, talked about, and there's some, like, neat conflicts to get involved in, so, like, I love this show, I'd love to see it come to life, but what did crack me up, and I'm just gonna read this, is, I looked into it 'cause I Wikipedia'd them and saw, like, if there were any video games, and I was surprised that there were, but the last one that came out is Avatar: The Last Airbender Into the Inferno, and it said it was like an MMO, so I clicked on it's interesting and it, like, pops up like the Wii game, and
Mm-hmm.
when you go into the gameplay section on Wikipedia, there isn't tons of information, and it looks like you play, like, as the kind of main characters from the game, whereas my vision is sort of like you make your own character. But it's funny in the gameplay section, the first sentence says, "Gameplay styles vary on different platforms. In the Nintendo DS version, the characters have very large heads, giving the game a cartoonish feel." And that's like the intro to the gameplay section. It's like
Interesting.
such a weird detail for them to have put out. So I imagine it with normal size heads specifically. Uh,
Yeah. Good detail to include those normal size heads.
That's right. I think that's a core part of my vision is you have a normal head and then you like create kind of like a bender based off of characters from the show, but like, with your own like spin on it and you could have different skill trees based on what kind of like bending you have and like you could be like more defensive if you're like an earthbender with like, making like rock shields and stuff, but there's
Mm-hmm.
also like
Mm-hmm.
projectiles you could shoot and it could be really cool.
That does
I
sound
think a lot
cool.
of people would play it.
I think so too. People love Avatar and like Legend of Korra and all that. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's a good
They're
show.
great shows. There's
So
it's too bad there's never been a movie, but they're great shows.
well, for me, I went a completely different route than you, and honestly, like I was just thinking about what to include in this. So I was going a different route. I went with my one of my favorite authors is Agatha Christie, as you may or may not know, which is she
Mhm.
is very big into the murder mystery kind of novels, very well known. I think she's the best selling murder mystery author of all time. So I mean,
Mhm.
she has like a ton of books, so put it that way. But I thought this would be a really cool anthology of maybe if they turn some of her stories into some murder mystery kind of graphic novel games. Like she does a really good job of kind of creating these interesting settings and putting, you know, 8 to 12 characters that all have kind of a different backstory and motivations, and I feel like going through in a like a Danganronpa or Phoenix Wright kind of rip off kind of way, and just going through these mysteries and maybe giving it a bit of a cool art style might be kind of cool. Just a nice whodunit kind of mystery, you know. These are always fun to solve if it's done well, and I think that they would lend themselves well to a video game in that way, like kind of like an Obra Dinn. Maybe you're going around collecting some evidence. I don't know if they would follow the books exactly, but you know, these kind of inspired stories, I guess, would be what I was looking for.
That's
Your idea is
awesome.
way more fleshed out, but I don't know.
I like your idea a lot, though. I think like that's a genre that is quite niche, doesn't get explored a lot, and I really like the whodunits, and like there are tons of like modern
There's
whodunit
not,
kind of
right?
stuff. Like even in movies too, like Knives Out came out recently, and like that was an awesome movie. And then we kind of got on like a whodunit sort of train, and it's like oh, the best whodunit movies, and they're like all like 15 years old at least.
Yeah,
So I would love a revival of that genre a bit.
yeah. I was kind of thinking about the Zero Escape games too, because one interesting aspect of those is that they have different endings, and in the different endings, different people will end up being the killer. So I thought that maybe
Oh,
depending
okay.
like what evidence you find throughout the game or whatever, maybe there's some choices or something, but there could be, you know, maybe potential for different characters to be the killer, and there's some replay value in there.
Right. Okay, that's a
Just a
really
cool
cool
shout. Yeah.
aspect. And it also like kind of like encourages you if you find evidence that like you can kind of justify a bit. It doesn't just totally lead you down the wrong trail.
Yeah. The
If
Agatha Christie
possible.
video game chronology.
I'd buy it. I'd 100% buy that.
There you go. Perfect. Well, I think that's going to close us out for the show today then, Kate. We've had a long discussion about all these stuff, so this has been great. Like we said at the top of the show, we're really excited for the 25th episode next time with our top 25 official list of the best games of all time, so we'll be working on that. I think that's it, hey? So let's close out the show, Kate. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you guys again in 2 weeks for that bonus. Well, it's not even a bonus episode. We'll see you in 2 weeks for the list of the best 25 games of all time. Looking forward to it. We'll see you then. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show, Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.